In this update, we've got some big changes on the way, especially after the first of the year. But what's coming up is some severe weather over the next several days. So let's break down the details for you in this update. Take a look at the overall big picture this morning. We have a pretty significant trough that has now dug into the southern plains. That's causing a lot of lift. And as this trough goes negatively tilted, we do have to be concerned about severe weather for those areas into Texas, heading into southeast, not just today, but to tomorrow. And then it kind of reloads again, heading into Saturday. At the same time, we've had the first white Christmas up there in New York City just yesterday. So that was the first time, I think, in about 15 years up there for them. But warmer air will be starting to move in for much of the lower 48. But after the first of the year, things are going to be changing in a big way as much colder air is already starting to build. And that will slowly start to shift southbound after the new year and likely going to intensify heading into that second week of January. So if you are new to the channel and like detailed weather breakdowns, hit the subscribe button and you're in. You get all my daily content on this channel. And I would love to reach 250,000 subscribers by the end of the year, and you can help me get there by subscribing to the channel and following all my daily content. So here's the setup for today. We do unfortunately have that negatively tilted trough that is now dug into the Dallas-Fort Worth area. Now, we've got a lot of more moisture content available to work with once they shift east of the Dallas-Fort Worth area. So within Dallas, I'm not really terribly too concerned about severe storms. These storms are going to be what they call elevated, so above the boundary layer. You still can get some larger hail with that type setup because we do have some colder air aloft, but it's mainly a wind threat and a heavy rain threat. But once they shift east of the Dallas-Fort Worth area, that's where I'm more concerned about. We do have elevated moisture return surging from the Gulf of Mexico. We've got dew points well into the 60s across this region, and this where the atmosphere is going to have a lot of shear out ahead of it. And unfortunately, that could set the stage for tornadoes within this sector into this afternoon, going into the early evening time frame, as well as large hail and some damaging winds. So definitely a concerning setup for today across the deep south. So here's the latest update from the Storm Prediction Center. They do in fact have that marginal risk with some of those elevated storms within the Dallas-Fort Worth area, but a higher risk going to a slight risk once we shift east to Dallas and especially southeast of Dallas. So if you live into, say, central Texas, especially southeast Texas, into east Texas, western Oklahoma, for those areas into Shreveport, back into Lake Charles, definitely be on high alert for all three modes of severe weather. Unfortunately, yes, huge concern for tornadoes today across that region, as well as damaging winds and some larger hail is going to be mixed in. So for right now, here's what the radar setup looks like right now. We've got showers and thunderstorms moving into the Dallas-Fort Worth area. These aren't severe. Some of those are producing some 50-mile-per-hour wind gust. But I think once they shift east of Dallas as we get into the afternoon, likely in Dallas it's from 10 to 2 o'clock. After 2 o'clock, things start to explode east of the Dallas-Fort Worth area into East Texas. That's where I'm definitely more concerned with especially with these helicity tracks are kind of showing up on the latest guidance from the high resolution models. So we could get some mixed in larger hails. Definitely not out of the question with that pocket of colder air aloft within the Dallas-Fort Worth region, but it's mainly favored east of Dallas into East Texas, especially for those areas into southeastern Texas, into the Piney Woods down there into southeast Texas. Definitely a huge concern with all three modes, and that will shift later on to this evening into the western areas of Louisiana, especially the Shreveport, the Lake Charles vicinity, and this would likely expand into Mississippi heading into the day as more of a marginal risk for tomorrow, but then it just kind of reloads as we head into Saturday. So for right now, the concern is for tornadoes east of Dallas, especially into East Texas and especially into Southeast Texas. And I wouldn't even be surprised this possibly even gets upgraded to a 10% probability as we get into the afternoon afternoon update as things start to come together. We could see a strong tornado, one of those EF2 type varieties within this sector. So this is likely going to be under a tornado watch during that time frame. Your main concern is likely going to be 1 to 9 o'clock. So 1 to 9 o'clock into the green and the brown shaded areas. That's where the most favored areas for severe weather. You're likely going to be under tornado watch. So definitely have your safety plan in place because we look to have potentially a significant day, and if all the dynamics start to come together. So, but the radar is going to be lit up like a Christmas tree. We got a lot of intense rain and lightning within this region, and then some of those little isolated bubblers within this sector could have some larger hail and could be rotating at the surface, as these are more surface based or more elevated based within Dallas, or more surface based on the east of Dallas, East Texas, Southeast Texas. Those are the ones I'm most concerned with, shifting into Arkansas and western areas of Louisiana. And then I think it just kind of reloads again on Saturday as we have another trough that's going to be diving in. So we'll have the same kind of dynamics, right? We'll have the moisture return from the Gulf of Mexico. This would likely be a little bit further off to the east into Southeast Texas by then. But nonetheless, this also could be a fairly significant threat for severe weather, heading into that Saturday time frame, as much of the country kind of warms up in a big way heading into that last weekend of December, because we get warm, guys, for December standards. I mean, it's lit up across the board of 10, 15, 20 degrees, if not almost 25 degrees above average once you get into Sunday. So we got a lot of warmer air for December standards on the table, and I think it actually even gets stronger heading into Monday. But there's your Sunday setup. Well, as the severe threat starts to wind down in the southeast by then, we'll start to shift that heavier rain back into the Carolinas. This will be all rain because there's not going to be any colder air to speak of during this time frame, heading into the December 29th time frame. So we should start to see some scattered, some heavier rains move back into the picture of West Virginia, Ohio region, back into the Virginia vicinity, into Pennsylvania, even all the way up into New England. This would likely be all rain, as most of the colder air retreats well north into Canada. In fact, here's some of your high temperatures heading into that Monday timeframe. Not out of the question, we could be pushing 90 degrees down there in deep South Texas. So that's definitely some warmer air for December. Widespread 70s across the board, 60s, 50s. It's really hard pressed to even see a below freezing temperature for a high, really anywhere in the lower 48. So it's very unusually well above average air mass that will be setting in and likely peaking at that 30th time frame, because once we head into the New Year's Eve, New Year's Day time frame, things start to change in a big way. So it's not a drastic push of Arctic air at first, but it's a step down process of much colder air considering where we've been, right? Colder air starts to funnel in down from Canada into the lower 48, shifts back into most of the lower 48. And so for the breakdown over the next 7 days kind of looks like this. Obviously, we've got the Pacific system still coming in. These same areas have been getting inundated with heavy rains along the coast, and northern California continue. The Intermountain West regions, this would likely be mixed in snow, but the setup for the precipitation looks like this over the next 7 days. So this is likely the last system coming across the plains that's for today, tomorrow, into Saturday. So these all include those three systems coming in. So the heavier rains are likely east of the I-35 corridor, especially as you get into East Texas, Louisiana, Mississippi, into Georgia, Alabama, into Tennessee, back into Kentucky, into West Virginia. Most of this is not likely any snow because there's obviously not going to be any colder air to speak of during this time frame between now and say the end of the December. But again, things change in a big way, shifting into that first week of January. So this is likely not going to be, say, Arctic air in the beginning, but definitely much colder air will come in for that first week of January, and also set the stage to drop the snow line a little bit further south. So we should see areas of low pressure set up into British Columbia start swinging down, stopping in somewhere in the vicinity of the Texas Panhandle, and then likely shift slingshotting eastbound with the colder air and opportunities for cross-polar flow and some snow chances coming back in the picture for within that region. But beyond that, definitely some heavier snows will be continue to funnel in heading into that first week of January timeframe. So we should start to see heavier snows sneak back in the picture into Montana, through the Dakotas, back into Wyoming, much of Colorado, likely ending somewhere within the Texas Panhandle, and slingshotting. So the heavier swaths of snow should include, for those areas in Nebraska, back into Kansas, and then lighter snows as you shift off to the east, as we'll have a step down process, a much colder air continue to move in. And by the time we head into that second week of January, and I think the models are still trying to come together on this of what's to come, but the teleconnections are already hinting at a much colder air mass, with the polar vortex likely stretching out by then and pushing and weakening big time and pushing much colder air into the lower 48. So by the time we head into that January 7th, and that's starting the beginning of that second week of January, we're likely going to get the coldest air mass of the season to funnel into the lower 48. And this would likely intensify the deeper we get into that second week of January, with the coldest anomalies definitely highlighting those areas across the north central plains into the Great Lakes, much of the Ohio Valley, and getting into the Carolinas and much of the Mid-Atlantic into the Northeast. And again, you get kind of more of a glancing blow shifting further south for those areas into southern plains, and most of the western corridor would likely kind of miss out on most of the much colder air that will be coming in that first couple of weeks of January. So guys, I appreciate you guys watching. Do like this video, definitely hit the subscribe button, and catch my next update. Why I protect you before and after the storm.